The museum locked me inside the receiving room with the empty gilt frame of winter light and two people who had already decided I needed watching. One was security. The other was Martin Keene. The canvas itself was gone. The transit crate stood open against the wall. I had signed it into receiving Monday morning with the outer seal intact. Outside the glass panel, staff slowed as they passed. They looked at the frame instead. Winter Light was on private loan. My signature sat at the bottom of the last custody form. By noon, the insurer had been notified. If the timeline held, the police would be next. I had spent 15 years telling younger staff that chain of custody mattered because objects could not defend themselves. Now the paperwork was doing a better job accusing me than anyone in the building. Martin placed my access badge on the table. Until we understand what happened, you are not to enter collection storage, conservation, or staff offices. I nodded. That was my first mistake. Martin slid the custody form toward security. Monday morning, he said. He already knew when I had signed it. I had not told him. Then the door opened. Tessa Lane stepped in carrying a conservation lamp. Martin frowned. I didn't ask for you. No, she said. The insurer did. Tessa crossed to the frame and angled the lamp across its back. Then she froze. Near the bottom was a torn cream-colored conservation tag beneath old adhesive. She knew that tag. She had written it herself. When did you sign for this? Monday, a little after 9. Security stepped closer. What does that mean? Tessa touched nothing. The seal was disturbed and reset. She looked at Martin. The frame was opened before Monday. I turned toward Martin. He did not ask how she knew. He did not look surprised. He kept looking at me. That frightened me more, because if Tessa was right, my signature had not placed me at the beginning of the disappearance. It had placed me exactly where someone needed me, after it had already begun. I had not walked into a mistake. I had walked into a story someone had prepared before I arrived. Martin recovered first. Opened is not the same as removed, he said. Tessa switched off the lamp. No. Then let's not turn an observation into a conclusion. His tone was measured, almost gentle. The tone he used with trustees who wanted to feel they had made a difficult decision themselves. Security's name was Peter Shaw. I had known him 11 years. He kept his eyes on the custody form. Can the seal tell us when it was disturbed? He asked. Not precisely. Martin exhaled through his nose. But before Monday? Tessa hesitated. Yes. Peter finally raised his head. That small movement mattered more than I wanted it to. Martin reached for the clear evidence sleeve beside the frame. Tessa put one hand flat on the table. Don't. He stopped. The insurer asked that nothing be moved until their investigator arrives. I am aware of procedure. Then follow it. Peter shifted his weight. Martin's jaw tightened, then relaxed. Of course. Tessa removed her hand. She did not apologize. I had worked beside her for nearly 4 years, long enough to know she hated public conflict. She would correct a mislabeled solvent bottle from across the lab, but if 2 department heads started arguing, she usually found a reason to inspect something under magnification. Today she had told the executive director not to touch evidence. That scared me almost as much as the empty frame. A phone vibrated on the table. Peter checked the screen. The insurer's investigator is downstairs. Martin nodded. Good. Miles can wait elsewhere. Peter glanced at me. His badge is disabled. I know. There it was again. Not the words. The certainty. Martin knew what had been done before anyone explained it. Tessa closed her examination case. Where is the movement log? Martin answered too quickly. Registrar's office. Peter's gaze moved to him. I felt the old reflex rising in me. Make this easier. Lower the temperature. Tell everyone I understood why they were being careful. For years, that instinct had passed for professionalism. I kept my mouth shut for a different reason now. Not to surrender. To listen. Tessa turned toward me. Did you move Winter Light on Monday? From gallery staging to receiving. Nothing after that. Alone? No. Luis was with me for the first transfer. Peter signed us through the service corridor. Peter nodded once. Martin picked up my badge. We can reconstruct all of that later. Tessa's attention stayed on me. What about Sunday? I wasn't here. Can you prove it? The question hit harder than I expected. Not because I could not, because she had asked me like an investigator, not a friend. Probably. That isn't an answer. My parking record. Building access. I was home most of the day. Martin gave a thin smile. Then this should be simple. Tessa turned to him. If it were simple, you wouldn't have disabled his badge before the insurer arrived. Nobody spoke. Peter's phone vibrated again. This time he stepped away to answer it. Martin's face stayed calm, but the badge in his hand bent slightly between his fingers. Tessa saw it. So did I. A second later, Peter ended the call. The investigator wants the movement log, the access records, and every condition report from the last 30 days. Tessa went still. Not dramatically, just enough that I noticed. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her examination case. Martin noticed too. For 1 second, neither of them looked at me. They looked at each other. That was when the question changed. I had been asking who took Winter Light. Now I wanted to know what had happened to that frame before Monday morning. And why the two people standing closest to the answer both seemed afraid of the same paperwork. Naomi Price arrived wearing a charcoal coat and the expression of someone who had learned not to trust the first version of anything. Peter led her into the receiving room while Martin asked me to wait in the staff conference room across the hall. The door stayed open. That was supposed to make it feel less like detention. It did not. I sat at the end of the table with my disabled badge beside my hand. Through the glass wall, I could see Naomi speaking to Tessa near the empty frame. Martin stood several feet away, answering only when asked. Luis Moreno passed the conference room twice. The first time, he pretended not to see me. The second time, he stopped. Luis had been registrar at Ashford for 6 years. Usually he entered a room talking. Now, he stayed in the doorway. "You okay?" he asked. "No." He rubbed his thumb against the edge of his phone. "I heard they pulled the movement records." "So did I." "And access logs." "Yes." He nodded. Nothing about the way he stood suggested he thought I had stolen Winter Light. Nothing suggested he was willing to be seen believing me, either. That distinction hurt more than suspicion. "Luis." He looked down the hall before meeting my eyes. "Did we move that painting together Monday?" His shoulders lowered. "From staging to receiving. Anything unusual?" "No." "Then say that when Naomi asks." "I will." He hesitated. "My supervisor told everyone not to discuss the case." "I'm not asking you to discuss the case. I'm asking whether you remember pushing a crate down a hallway with me." His face tightened. "You know how this looks." There it was, not accusation. Permission to step away. I picked up my badge and turned it over once. "Yeah," I said. "I do." Luis left. I hated how familiar the moment felt. 7 years earlier, at Calder House Museum, a junior registrar named Emily Park had signed off on a packing change she should have stopped. A 19th century panel shifted during transport and developed a hairline split near one corner. The damage was repairable. Emily's mother was in chemotherapy. Emily was 26, exhausted, and 3 weeks away from qualifying for family medical leave. When the internal review began, I told Jan Grektor that the final packing decision had been mine. It had not. I had approved the transport schedule. Emily had approved the altered crate support after I left for another installation. I told myself the difference did not matter. It did. The official report said I had failed to supervise collection handling. Emily kept her job. I lost authority over outgoing loans. 6 months later, when Ashford offered me a position, I left without correcting anyone who repeated the phrase, "poor collection control." I had called that dignity for years. Maybe it had been fear with better manners. A paper cup appeared beside my hand. Black coffee. No sugar. Tessa pulled out the chair across from me. I had not seen her enter. "Naomi wants to speak with you in a few minutes," she said. I wrapped both hands around the cup but did not drink. "You remembered. You have ordered the same coffee every weekday since I met you." "That sounds less thoughtful when you say it like that." It was not meant to sound thoughtful. That was Tessa. Kindness delivered with enough irritation to make sure nobody mistook it for comfort. Her gaze shifted toward the hallway. "Luis was here. You saw him leave?" I saw him decide whether standing in a doorway counted as loyalty. I almost smiled. Almost. "He is scared. So are you." "I'm not avoiding the hallway." "No. You're sitting in a glass room where everyone can see you, pretending you're not angry." I set the cup down. "You came here to help?" "I came here because Naomi asked me to stay available." "That wasn't what I asked." Tessa rested her forearms on the table. Then she said, "I think you have a habit of making it very easy for people to misunderstand you." I leaned back. "You got that from one morning?" No, the answer came too quickly. I waited. She looked at the coffee instead of me. 3 years ago, Martin blamed you for the delayed Whitcomb loan in front of the collections committee. I remembered. A lender had changed the humidity requirement 48 hours before transport. I had refused to move the work until the crate was modified. The delay cost the museum money. Martin told the committee I had failed to anticipate a routine condition. You were in that meeting? I asked. I was checking the frame. And? You let him finish. What was I supposed to do? Tell them he was lying. I corrected the report later. In an email nobody read. You read it? Yes. Tessa pushed the coffee slightly closer to me. That is my point. Peter appeared at the doorway. Naomi is almost ready. I nodded. He did not leave immediately. Miles, there is something else. The muscles in my neck tightened. What? A reporter called the main office. Tessa's eyes went to him. About Winter Light? About Miles. Peter looked uncomfortable now. She asked whether today's suspension was related to the incident at Calder House. I saw the old loading dock again. Emily crying into her coat. My signature going onto a version of events I knew was incomplete. Tessa watched my face. What incident? I could have told her the shortest version. A damaged panel. A bad decision. An old employer. Instead, I heard myself say the sentence I had used for 7 years. It was complicated. Tessa's expression changed. Not judgment, recognition. That sentence again. What? The one that lets everyone else choose the simple version. Peter shifted awkwardly in the doorway. I looked down at my badge. The plastic had a white stress line where Martin had bent it. A small mark. Easy to miss, unless you knew where to look. I finally took a drink of the coffee. It had already started to cool. When Naomi asks about Calder House, Tessa said, "Tell her what actually happened." You don't know what actually happened. No, she stood. But I know what you do when someone else tells the story first. Peter stepped aside for her. Before she left, she stopped beside the door. Miles. I looked up. Being quiet is not the same as being honest. Then she walked back toward conservation. A minute later, Naomi appeared in the hallway, carrying a legal pad. Behind her, 2 staff members were pretending to study the same notice board. My phone lit on the table. A message from an old Calder House colleague. I had not spoken to him in years. Saw the article request. They are asking about Emily again. I read it twice. Then another line appeared. You should know she is not telling the story the way you remember it. Naomi reached the doorway. Mr. Bennett? I turned the phone face down. This time, I did not nod. I stood. Before we start, I said, there is something from my last museum you need to hear from me first. Naomi Price closed the conference room door but left the blinds open. Tell me about Calder House. I did. Not the polished version. Not the one that had followed me into job interviews and committee rooms for 7 years. I told her about Emily Park, the altered crate support, the hairline split in the panel, and the report I had signed, because I thought protecting a younger employee was the decent thing to do. Naomi wrote without interrupting. When I finished, she asked, "Did you lie in the report?" I omitted who approved the packing change. That is not what I asked. Yes. The word sat badly in my mouth. Across the hall, Tessa moved between the receiving room and conservation. She never looked toward me. Naomi set down her pen. You understand why that matters now? Yes. If someone wants to argue that you manipulate records when it suits you, your old decision gives them material. I wanted to explain that I had never changed an object record at Ashford. I wanted to tell her Calder House had been about protecting someone, not protecting myself. Instead, I said, I understand. Naomi studied me for a moment. Good. Then stop helping other people make their case. She opened a folder. Let's talk about Sunday. My parking account showed no entry. My badge showed no access. My building login had not been used. I had spent most of the day at home replacing a kitchen faucet that had been leaking for 3 weeks. There was a receipt for the parts. Naomi did not smile when I told her that. She slid a printed movement log across the table. Winter Light had been recorded in gallery staging late Friday afternoon. The next official movement was mine on Monday morning, the sealed crate transfer into receiving. There should have been nothing between them. There was. A handwritten line had been inserted beneath Friday's entry. Temporary transfer to imaging. Sunday evening. No collections. Manager authorization. No registrar initials. Only a departmental code I recognized. Conservation. I read it twice. Who can enter handwritten movements? Naomi asked. Anyone with physical access to the log. Who normally does? Registrar. Collections. Sometimes conservation if an object moves directly between treatment spaces. Could Tessa? Yes. The answer hurt more than it should have. Naomi noticed. You trust her. I trust her work. That was careful. It was. Accurate. She turned the page. The imaging room is not in conservation. No. Why would a conservation code be used? I don't know. The door opened. Peter stood there with a clear evidence sleeve. Inside it was the torn cream-colored tag from the back of the frame. Naomi motioned him in. Tessa asked that this be documented before anyone removes it. Peter placed the sleeve on the table. Under the fluorescent light, the tag looked even smaller than it had beneath the conservation lamp. My career had begun to feel ridiculous beside it. Naomi pointed to the handwriting. You recognize this? Tessa's. And the notation? I leaned closer. The tag carried the accession reference, treatment initials, and a short note written in pencil. Seal renewed after examination. My stomach tightened. Was that there before? I don't know. Naomi's voice stayed level. You saw the tag Monday. I saw the back of the frame. I did not inspect the tag. Would you normally? No. Not unless conservation flagged a condition issue. Peter crossed his arms. So if someone opened the frame and resealed it, collections could move it without knowing. Yes. Naomi turned the sleeve over. On the reverse side of the tag was a faint impression from another piece of paper that had once rested against it. A date. Sunday. And beneath it, Tessa's initials. Nobody spoke. Peter looked toward the glass wall. Tessa was standing in the corridor. She had seen the sleeve. She had seen our faces. Naomi opened the door. Miss Lane, come in. Tessa entered and closed the door behind her. Naomi held up the sleeve. Are these your initials? Tessa looked at the tag. Yes. Did you examine Winter Light on Sunday? A pause. No. Naomi waited. Tessa's fingers tightened around the seam of her coat. I was not in the building Sunday. Peter checked his phone. Her badge agrees. Naomi looked back at the tag. Then why are your initials on a Sunday notation? Tessa did not answer. I felt the old instinct rise again. Give her time. Make it easier. Find a harmless explanation before anyone else could find a cruel one. I stopped myself. Tessa. She looked at me. Do you know why your initials are there? Her eyes dropped to the table. I know why they might be. Naomi pulled out the chair beside her. Sit. Tessa remained standing. Friday afternoon, Martin asked me to prepare a condition update for Winter Light. Naomi's pen moved again. Why? He said the donor's office wanted fresh documentation before a photography review. What photography review? I wasn't told. Did you inspect the painting? Friday, yes. And the seal? Intact. Naomi pointed to the tag. This says renewed after examination. That is not my note. The words came quickly. Not frightened. Angry. I had never heard Tessa sound angry about handwriting before. Naomi slid the sleeve closer. But those are your initials. They look like mine. Are they? Tessa bent over the table. For several seconds, she studied the pencil marks. Then she shook her head. I don't initial like that on loose tags. Peter frowned. What is the difference? Tessa reached for a blank sheet but stopped before touching anything. May I? Naomi nodded. Tessa wrote her initials. The first letter leaned sharply forward. The second ended with a short horizontal stroke. The marks on the tag were close. Not exact. Naomi placed the samples side by side. Could someone copy them? Anyone who had seen enough of my reports. That included half the collection staff. It also included Martin. I hated how quickly my mind supplied his name. Naomi did not ask what I was thinking. She asked Peter for the access log to the imaging room. He handed over another page. The room had been opened Sunday evening with a temporary facilities badge. Not assigned to me, not assigned to Tessa, not assigned to anyone in collections. Naomi tapped the entry. Who issued this? Peter's face changed. I did. When? Friday. To whom? He looked toward the receiving room. Martin's office requested it. Tessa sat down at last. Naomi's voice became quieter. Requested for whom? Peter swallowed. They said a consultant was coming in after hours. What consultant? I wasn't given a name. My hand stayed flat on the table. The torn tag, the false-looking initials, the handwritten movement entry, a temporary badge. None of it proved where Winterlight had gone, but it proved something else. Someone had created a path through the museum on Sunday that did not include me. Naomi gathered the pages into a single stack. Mr. Shaw, I need the original badge request email, preserved immediately. Peter nodded. Tessa, I need every condition report you created for Winterlight this month. Her face went still again. There it was. The same reaction from the receiving room. This time I was close enough to see what I had missed before. Not surprise. Shame. Naomi saw it too. What am I going to find? Tessa stared at the torn cream tag between us. When she finally answered, her voice was barely above a whisper. A report with my signature on it. I waited. She did not look at me. And if Martin shows it to you first, she said, it is going to make this look worse. The board meeting was supposed to be private. By the time I entered the East Conference Room, Helen Stratton was already there with her attorney. Martin sat at the head of the table. Naomi Price had 3 folders open in front of her, and 2 trustees were speaking quietly. Luis stood near the wall. Peter was beside him. Tessa arrived after me and stopped when she saw the seats. There were no empty chairs together. I took the chair closest to the door. Helen did not look at me. Her attorney did. Mr. Bennett, he said, before we begin, I want to be clear that my client has not accused you of theft. The sentence did what sentences like that always do. It put theft in the room. Martin folded his hands. This meeting is about institutional responsibility. Naomi did not look up. It is about the location of a missing painting. Martin's mouth tightened. One of the trustees, Carol Ames, cleared her throat. We also need to understand whether staff procedures were bypassed. Not missing, not stolen. Bypassed. Martin slid a copy of the condition report across the table. Tessa's signature was at the bottom. Helen finally looked up. What is that? Tessa spoke before Martin could. A condition report prepared before the painting left conservation. Martin turned slightly toward her. Prepared and signed by you. Yes. Helen's attorney picked up the page. It says the frame was examined and resealed. Tessa's hand stayed still in her lap. Yes. And the date is Friday. Yes, Martin added, which means the seal could have been disturbed as part of authorized conservation work. Naomi looked at him. The torn tag indicates a later disturbance. We do not know that conclusively. Tessa leaned forward. We know the adhesive was reset after my Friday examination. Martin's voice softened. Tessa, you told us yourself that you cannot date adhesive precisely. I can tell when my work was altered. That is not the same thing. Helen's attorney placed the report on the table. Then let us talk about the handwritten Sunday movement. Martin's gaze moved to Naomi. She opened another folder. A temporary badge was used to access imaging on Sunday evening. The badge was requested through the director's office. Carol looked at Martin. For a consultant? That is my understanding. Name? I do not recall. Peter shifted beside the wall. Martin noticed. Security may have retained the request. Peter said. We did. Martin gave him a courteous smile. Good. Naomi did not return it. The request names no consultant. The room changed. Pens stopped moving. Helen's attorney leaned back. Martin said, administrative omissions are not evidence of misconduct. I could feel the old reflex gathering inside me. Help him. Clarify that the museum used temporary badges often. Say that missing names happened. Lower the temperature. For years, I had mistaken that instinct for fairness. I opened my mouth. Then I saw Tessa. She was not looking at Martin. She was looking at me, not asking me to defend her, not asking me to attack him, just waiting to see whether I would disappear from my own story again. I closed my mouth. Carol turned toward me. Miles, did you know Winterlight was taken to imaging? No. Did you authorize it? No. Did you know about the Friday condition report? I knew Tessa had completed routine conservation work. I did not know the frame would later be moved. Martin spoke before Carol could ask anything else. We should be careful with the word later. Naomi tapped the Sunday log. This is later. Martin did not answer. Helen's attorney looked at Tessa. Did you know the painting went to imaging? Tessa's throat moved. No. The answer came cleanly. Too cleanly. I heard it. Naomi heard it too. Martin leaned back. Then we are dealing with an irregular movement, an unidentified consultant, a compromised seal. and a collections manager whose signature is the last verified custody point. My hands stayed flat on the table. Carol looked at me. Miles? There were 6 people watching now. This was the moment where I usually made myself smaller. I did not. My signature proves when I received the frame, I said. It does not prove what happened before that. Martin nodded as though I had helped him. Exactly. Which is why we must avoid conclusions. Then he added the word. Especially collusion. Tessa's head snapped toward him. Helen's attorney stopped writing. Naomi looked up. Carol said, "Who said anything about collusion?" Martin paused, only for a second. But this time everyone saw it. I am describing one possibility the insurer may have to consider. Naomi's voice went flat. I have not used that word. Martin's smile arrived late. Then perhaps I am anticipating where this could go. The word stayed in the room. Collusion. It joined my signature to Tessa's, my old Calder House report, her condition report, my access to collections, her access to conservation. 2 people who had worked together for years and could be made to look like a partnership. Tessa pushed her chair back. I need to correct something. Martin turned to her. You do not have to make statements without counsel. I am not asking permission. Naomi held up one hand. Tessa, if what you are about to say changes your own exposure, I would prefer you wait until you have representation. That trapped her. If she spoke, she could damage herself. If she stayed quiet, the silence would damage me. I knew that shape. I had lived inside it before. Tessa looked at me. I am sorry. Helen's attorney heard only one part of that sentence. For what? Tessa did not answer. Martin did. We are all under pressure. I said, do not use her silence as an answer. Every face turned toward me. It was the first time that day I had interrupted anyone. Martin's expression cooled. No one is doing that. You just did. Carol sat back. Helen finally looked directly at me. Not kindly. Not cruelly. Like someone deciding whether I was dangerous to her property. Her attorney closed the condition report. We need to suspend all informal contact between Mr. Bennett and Miss Lane until the insurer completes preliminary interviews. Tessa went pale. Naomi said, that is not my instruction. It is my client's condition for continued cooperation. Martin did not object. Of course he did not. Helen stood. I trusted this museum because I was told the people handling my collection were careful. Her eyes moved from Tessa to me. I do not know which of you failed me. That sentence landed harder than accusation, because failure was broad enough to survive even if I was innocent. Chairs moved, folders closed. People avoided touching the same papers. When I stepped into the corridor, 3 staff members were waiting near the elevators. Luis was one of them. He looked at me, then at Tessa, coming out behind me. Someone farther down the hall whispered something I could not hear. Another person answered with a word I could. Together. Tessa stopped walking. So did I. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A notification from the local arts site filled the screen. The headline was short. Museum probes. Possible staff collusion in missing painting case. No names. Not yet. But beneath the headline was a photograph from last spring. Tessa and me standing beside the same frame. She was holding one end. I was holding the other. By the time I got home, the headline had changed twice. First it said possible staff collusion. Then it used my name. I left my phone face down on the kitchen counter and opened the cabinet beneath the sink. The faucet I had repaired Sunday had started dripping again. That felt almost generous. A problem with one cause, one wrench, one answer. I was tightening the supply line when someone knocked. 3 measured taps. Tessa was on the porch holding a paper bag from the deli near the museum. You should not be here, I said. I know. Helen's attorney asked us not to have informal contact. I know that too. Then why are you here? She lifted the bag. You did not eat lunch. I stepped aside. 10 minutes. Fair. My kitchen was narrow enough that 2 people had to negotiate around the table. Tessa set down 2 wrapped sandwiches and 2 bottles of water. You came here to tell me something, I said. Yes. Then tell me. She looked toward the dark window above the sink. I signed the condition report. I know. No. You know my signature is on it. You do not know how it got there. I did not touch the sandwich. She sat across from me. Martin asked me to prepare the report Friday afternoon. I inspected Winter Light. The canvas was stable. The frame was stable. The seal was intact. That part you told Naomi. Yes. What did you leave out? He called after closing. I waited. He said the donor's office had requested a short photography review. He told me the painting might be taken out of the frame for less than 10 minutes. You approved that? No. The answer came sharp. Then she corrected herself. I told him I needed to be present if the frame was opened. And? He said the review had been moved, and he would let me know. She removed a folded copy of the report from her coat pocket and placed it on the table. Her signature was at the bottom. Above it, the language looked routine. No visible change after examination. Frame secure. Seal renewed. You did not renew the seal. No. Then why did you sign it? Because Monday morning, before you arrived, he brought this to the lab. The refrigerator motor came on behind me. He said the photography review happened Sunday evening. He said the frame had been opened briefly, nothing had changed, and he needed the paperwork closed before the donor's office called. And you signed without inspecting it again? Yes. You believed him? Tessa shook her head. That hurt more. No. I leaned back. I believed it was probably harmless, she said. That is different. Not by much. I know. I stood and carried my untouched water to the sink. The faucet dripped once, then again. There was something else, she said. I kept my hand on the counter. Of course there was. Our lab budget was under review. I turned. Martin had been talking about eliminating one of my technician positions. That week, he told me he could keep the lab whole if I stopped turning routine matters into compliance issues. You signed a false report to protect your staff. Yes. And yourself. She met my eyes. Yes. At least, she did not hide inside nobility. I was afraid of losing people in my lab, she said. And I decided that made the lie smaller. It did not. No. You let that report exist for days. Yes. You saw the seal was wrong Monday. Yes. And you waited until the painting was missing. Her fingers curled around the table edge. Yes. Anger was easier than disappointment. I picked up the wrench, then set it down because I did not need it. You stood in that receiving room and let me think you had just discovered the frame had been opened. I had just discovered how far it had gone. That is not the same thing. No, the same phrase we had used against Martin. It landed differently now. I moved to the other side of the kitchen. There was barely enough room for distance, but I made some anyway. Tessa unwrapped one sandwich and left it open on the table. I am giving Naomi the full account tomorrow. You should have done that today. Yes. You should have done it Friday. Yes. You should never have signed it. Yes. Each answer made it harder to stay angry in the easy way. She was not asking me to absolve her. What happens to you? I asked. I do not know. Your job? Maybe. My professional standing could take a hit. The museum can discipline me. The insurer can flag the report. Helen can refuse to let me touch anything she owns again. And your staff? If the lab loses funding, they may still lose their jobs. The practical cost sat between us with the sandwiches. No version where telling the truth restored everything. I sat again. There is something ugly I should say before you go. Tessa waited. Part of me wants to hand Naomi your report and let everyone stop looking at me. You should give her the report. That is not what I mean. I know. I mean, part of me wants this to become your mistake instead of mine. Her face tightened, but she stayed in the chair. It was my mistake. Not all of it. No. I rubbed my thumb over the white stress mark on my disabled badge. I spent years taking responsibility that belonged to other people. I do not want to become the man who survives by throwing it back at them. Then do not protect me, she said. Tell the truth about me. That was harder than forgiveness. It was also cleaner. I am sorry, Miles. I believed her. That did not mean I was ready to forgive her. I need you to leave. Her face changed, but she nodded. At the doorway, she stopped. I did not come because of the headline. Why did you come? Because tomorrow, I am going to tell Naomi something that may make you stop trusting me entirely. I did not want the report to tell you first. The answer reached somewhere I did not want touched. I stepped closer before I meant to. So did she. Her hand lifted, then stopped between us. Mine did too. For 1 second, wanting something felt dangerously close to needing it. I stepped back. If anything ever happens between us, it cannot begin, because you helped prove I was not a thief. Tessa lowered her hand. Good. Because I do not want gratitude. And I do not want rescue. Something in her expression softened. Recognition. She opened the door. "Eat the sandwich," she said. Then she left. When I returned to the table, the report was gone. The sandwich was not. Beside it lay the deli receipt with one sentence written on the back in Tessa's handwriting. "Ask Naomi who approved the photography review." I turned the receipt face down, not because I did not want the answer, because I finally understood that the next truth might cost Tessa more than it saved me. The email from Human Resources arrived before breakfast. Effective immediately, my suspension was unpaid. My health coverage would continue through the end of the month. My access to internal systems had been terminated. I was instructed not to contact staff regarding winter light unless counsel or the insurer approved it first. At the bottom, one sentence had been bolded. "Failure to comply may affect your employment status and any future severance determination." I read it twice while the coffee maker hissed behind me. Then I opened my banking app. Mortgage, utilities, insurance. A balance that looked ordinary yesterday and temporary now. Truth had begun sending invoices. My phone rang before I finished the coffee. "Naomi Price. I need to know whether Tessa contacted you last night." I stared at the deli receipt on the counter. "Yes." "Did you discuss the case?" "Yes." "What did she tell you?" I could have protected her by editing the answer. That instinct still arrived on time. I ignored it. She told me she signed the condition report without re-inspecting the painting. She said Martin told her the frame had been opened for a photography review. Naomi was quiet long enough that I could hear keyboard clicks. "Anything else?" She said the lab budget was under review, and Martin had tied cooperation to keeping her staff. "Did she give you anything?" I picked up the receipt. A deli receipt. She wrote a question on the back. She told me to ask who approved the photography review. "Do not throw it away." I wasn't planning to. "I also need you to stop speaking with her privately." The sentence landed harder than it should have. "Because Helen's attorney asked?" "Because both of you are now witnesses with potentially adverse interests." Adverse interests. A cleaner phrase than mistrust. If Tessa's account changes, or yours does, every private conversation between you becomes something counsel will examine. Then what am I allowed to do? Get your own attorney. I thought the museum's counsel covered employees. The museum's counsel represents the museum. That answer cost money before I even made the call. By late morning, I was sitting across from Rachel Dorsey in an office above a pharmacy downtown. She specialized in employment disputes and professional liability. She read the suspension letter, the Calder House report, and the notes I had written after Naomi's interviews. Then she looked at me over the pages. "You have a bad habit. I've been told. You keep treating institutional loyalty like a personal virtue." I said nothing. Rachel tapped the suspension notice. "They have frozen your income, removed your access, and preserved the option to deny severance. You are still speaking as though your first obligation is to avoid embarrassing the museum. I worked there for 12 years. That is a fact. It is not a legal strategy." I almost defended Ashford. Instead, I asked, "What do I do?" "You stop deleting discomfort from your own version of events." She slid a legal pad toward me. "Write down every conversation you remember about winter light, every unusual request. Every time Martin asked you to make something easier, faster, quieter, or unofficial." I picked up the pen. Rachel added, "And do not contact Tessa." "I know. Do not meet her. Do not text her. If she contacts you, preserve it and send it to me." That sounds extreme. It sounds expensive because you waited until the problem became expensive. Her retainer took most of what I kept in emergency savings. I paid it before I could talk myself into waiting. Outside, I watched the confirmation disappear from my banking screen. For years, I had believed telling the truth meant saying the correct words. Nobody had warned me that sometimes it also meant paying to keep those words from being rearranged. The museum called again that afternoon. Carol Ames from the board. "Miles, I'm calling personally. Not on behalf of the board." That sentence usually means the opposite. A small breath that might have been a laugh. "We have a governance meeting tomorrow. Martin wants authorization to appoint an outside crisis firm. For a missing painting? For the museum's reputation." The priority was obvious. The thing institutions protected first when frightened, Carol continued. "I need a direct answer. Did you and Tessa have any relationship outside work before this week?" "No." "Romantic?" "No." "Financial?" "No." "Did you socialize?" "Only at staff events." She hesitated. "There are photographs." I know. People are reading them a certain way. People are reading everything a certain way. My fingers tightened around the phone. The old Miles would have made it easy for her. He would have softened the insult, so she would not have to feel like she had made one. Instead, I said, "Ask what you actually want to know." Carol went quiet. Then she did. "Did Tessa help you alter records?" "No." "Did you help her?" "No." "Would you lie to protect her?" The question found the bruise. I thought about Emily Park, about a cracked panel, about 7 years spent letting one incomplete report speak for me. "No," I said. It was the first answer that felt like a promise rather than a defense. After the call, I worked at the kitchen table until evening. I canceled a conference trip. I postponed a roof repair. I moved money from a vacation account that had not funded a vacation in 3 years. Small practical decisions, none cinematic, all real. At dusk, headlights stopped outside. For one stupid second, I thought Tessa had come back. I hated the relief that rose before I saw Luis step out. He stayed on the sidewalk. "Naomi told us not to discuss the investigation," he said. "Then don't." He held up a cardboard box. "Human Resources asked me to bring your personal things from the office. My plant, a coffee mug, 2 framed photographs from museum installations, a sweater I had forgotten existed. 12 years reduced to something that fit between his hands." I took the box. Luis did not release it immediately. "People are saying you and Tessa planned the Sunday movement. Do you believe that?" He looked toward the street. "I don't know what I believe." "Then don't borrow somebody else's certainty." His eyes came back to mine. He let go of the box. "Before leaving," he said, "Martin told staff there may be layoffs if Helen pulls her collection. Not just my job, everyone's. If I pushed hard enough to expose what happened, people who had nothing to do with Winter Light could pay for the truth too." Luis walked back to his car. I carried the box inside. My phone lit up. "Tessa, only one line. I'm giving Naomi everything tomorrow." My thumb hovered over the screen. I wanted to ask whether she was all right. I wanted, more than I wanted to admit, not to be alone in this. Rachel's warning came back. So did the boundary I had set for myself. I would not make Tessa my refuge. I locked the phone without replying. Then I took Tessa's deli receipt from the counter, placed it in an envelope, and wrote Naomi's name across the front. Whatever happened next, I would not protect Tessa by hiding the truth, and I would not use her truth to hide from my own. My attorney called before the museum did. "Do not open social media," Rachel said. I was standing in the grocery store with a carton of eggs in one hand. That usually means I should. The museum's crisis firm released a statement. I put the eggs back. "What statement?" They confirmed that 2 employees are under review for record irregularities connected to Winter Light. 2 employees. You and Tessa. My phone buzzed before she finished speaking. An email from the Regional Museum Association. The panel I had been scheduled to lead next month was postponed pending clarification of current professional matters. Another message followed. "Emily Park." I stopped beside a freezer case. "I'm sorry." A reporter called me. "I told them Calder House handled the old incident internally and that you signed the final report. I can't reopen everything that happened back then." I read the message until the screen dimmed. She had not lied. That was what made it useful. She had left out the packing change, her approval, and the reason my name ended up carrying all of it. 7 years ago, I had made silence safe for her. Now she was using it. My thumbs moved over the keyboard. I started with, "I understand," then deleted it. I tried. "You don't need to apologize." Deleted that too. The old reflex was still alive. Make the person hurting you feel less guilty. Call it kindness. I locked the phone and left the store without buying anything. Rachel was waiting when I reached her office. She had printed the museum statement and marked 3 phrases. Record irregularities, undisclosed staff contact, potential coordination. I stared at the last one. Tessa came to my house once and told Naomi, "Yes, that is good. It doesn't look good. Those are different things." She pushed another page toward me. The local arts site had updated its story. Museum investigation expands as staff contact raises questions of coordination. Below it was the photograph of Tessa and me carrying the frame. My name was there now, so was hers. Rachel folded the page. Tessa's truthful confession makes the public version easier to sell. She signed a report she should not have signed. Then she contacted you after both of you were under scrutiny. So telling the truth makes us look worse. Temporarily. I laughed once. There is a reassuring word. Naomi has scheduled a formal reconstruction this afternoon. Museum counsel, Martin, Tessa, and her attorney will attend. Am I required? No. Then why go? Because they are going to discuss your conduct whether you are there or not. That was enough. The reconstruction took place in a conference suite rented by the insurer downtown. No museum walls, no paintings. Tessa sat beside an attorney I had never met. She looked tired. We did not speak. That was the boundary now. Not distance because we wanted it. Distance because truth had become something lawyers needed to observe. Naomi began with the Sunday access. Peter confirmed that Martin's office had requested a temporary badge for an outside consultant. Museum counsel interrupted. The request came from an administrative assistant. At whose direction? Naomi asked. Martin answered. Mine. Carol Ames, attending for the board, leaned forward. Who was the consultant? Martin adjusted one cuff. A specialist who occasionally advises institutions on collection valuation. Naomi wrote something. Name? Graham Voss. Company? Voss Advisory. Tessa's attorney asked. Why did a valuation specialist need access to imaging on a Sunday evening? Martin turned toward him. The museum was exploring options related to donor stewardship. Naomi lifted her eyes. What options? Portfolio documentation. Photography. Updated valuations. Was Helen Stratton informed? No. It was preliminary. Carol said, Martin, Winterlight does not belong to us. I am aware. I am aware. Then why was someone valuing it? He was not valuing it for sale. No one had said sale. Rachel's pen stopped. Naomi asked, what was he valuing it for? Martin's gaze moved across the table. This is becoming speculative. Tessa spoke. You told me it was a photography review. Martin did not look at her. And photography was involved. You told me the donor's office requested it. I may have misunderstood the source. You used Helen's name. His jaw tightened. Tessa's attorney touched her sleeve. She stopped. Naomi returned to Martin. Was Voss acting for the museum? Yes. Under a written engagement? I would need to check. Did the board approve it? Martin glanced at Carol. No formal approval was required for preliminary advisory work. Carol's face hardened. That was not my question. Naomi placed the temporary badge request on the table. Mr. Voss entered after the museum closed. Winterlight was logged into imaging. The frame was later found with a disturbed seal. Why was this handled outside ordinary collections procedure? Martin's answer came too fast. Because he was not a broker. Naomi did not move. Neither did Rachel. Carol slowly turned toward him. Naomi rested her pen beside the page. I did not call him a broker. Martin's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Tessa's face changed. Not triumph. Fear. Martin reached for the water and missed the glass by an inch before correcting his hand. That is a semantic distinction. No, Naomi said. It is a word you supplied. Museum counsel leaned toward him. Martin. He ignored her. Voss works in several capacities. Naomi's voice stayed calm. Was one of those capacities art finance? Martin looked at the witness table instead of at her. Carol whispered, Oh God. Martin turned on her. Do not dramatize this. The sentence came out sharper than anything I had heard from him all week. Carol pushed her chair back. You brought an art finance broker into the museum after hours to inspect a painting we do not own? No transaction occurred. Again, too fast. Naomi said. I did not ask whether a transaction occurred. Martin's control finally slipped. Because there was no loan. Nobody moved. Rachel wrote on her pad and slid it toward me. Do not speak. I did not need the instruction. The old Miles would have interrupted. I would have said there might be an explanation. I would have given Martin time to rebuild the room around his version. I stayed quiet. Not because silence was dignity. Because this time, someone else was revealing himself without my help. Naomi closed the folder. Mr. Keene, I am ending this session until counsel determines what financial records need to be preserved. Martin stared at her. You are treating an exploratory conversation as misconduct. No, she said. I am treating your knowledge of an unmentioned broker and an unmentioned loan as information. Across the table, Tessa's hands were clenched together. She did not look at me. She did not need to. The story had changed again. Winter Light was no longer only a missing painting. Someone had brought a broker into the museum after hours. Someone had opened a frame without the owner's permission. And the man who had spent days warning everyone not to jump to conclusions had just supplied 2 conclusions nobody else had spoken aloud. Broker. Loan. The board reconvened 2 days later. Not at the museum. Helen Stratton refused to return until she understood whether Winter Light had been used in a financial discussion without her consent. So we met in the insurer's conference suite again. Helen sat beside her attorney. Carol Ames had 3 other trustees with her. Naomi Price sat at the center of the table with a stack of preserved records. Rachel sat beside me. Tessa was across the room with her counsel. Martin arrived last. He looked rested. That bothered me more than if he had looked frightened. Museum counsel followed him in carrying a leather portfolio. Martin placed both hands on the table. I want to begin by saying that I understand how damaging the last few days have been. Martin continued. A series of administrative failures created an appearance that is more troubling than the underlying facts. Appearance, not conduct, not decision. Helen's attorney said, "Was my client's painting shown to an art finance advisor without her authorization?" Martin turned toward him. "It was shown to an outside specialist as part of a preliminary institutional review. That is not an answer. No financing occurred." Helen leaned forward. "Was my painting discussed as collateral?" Martin's face did not change. The museum was exploring bridge options. Winter Light was never pledged. Carol said, "You told the board there was no loan." "There was no loan." "That is not what Helen asked." Martin's eyes moved to me. I recognized the move. Shift the center. Make the person under suspicion defend himself. "Before we turn this into a governance spectacle," he said, "we should remember why this investigation began. A painting disappeared while under collections custody. The last verified custody signature belongs to Miles Bennett." Martin went on. "We also have a false condition report signed by Miss Lane, private contact between the 2 of them after the investigation began, and an earlier professional incident in which Mr. Bennett admitted withholding material information from an internal report. There it was, not a lie, a structure built from true pieces. The old version of me would have started correcting details. I would have explained Emily, explained Tessa, explained myself, until everyone forgot what question had been asked. I put both hands on the table. "Everything you just said about me is true." Martin paused. "I signed the final custody form. Tessa came to my house after the investigation began. Years ago, I signed a report that left out another employee's responsibility." Martin's expression softened. He thought I was helping him. "I made that old decision because I thought taking blame quietly made me decent. It did not. It made the record less true." Nobody interrupted. "So I am not asking this board to believe I am a good man." Martin's smile faded. "I am asking you to stop using that question to avoid a simpler one." I turned toward Helen. "Who authorized your painting to be opened on Sunday?" Martin said, "We have already addressed that." "No. You have described it." I looked back at him. "You authorized the temporary badge." "Yes." "You brought Graham Voss into the building." "Yes." "You told Tessa the donor's office wanted a photography review." Martin shifted in his chair. "That was my understanding at the time." Helen said, "My office requested nothing." Martin nodded. "Then I was mistaken about the source." I took 1 page from the folder Rachel had prepared for me. Naomi had received it that morning, through the insurer's preservation request. It was an email from Voss Advisory to Martin. I read only the line that mattered. "Please confirm whether the lender may treat the Stratton work as part of the museum's available collateral pool pending board review." Helen's attorney sat forward. Martin's lawyer said, "We object to characterization without context." "I have not characterized it," I said. "I read it." Martin looked at the page. "That email is being stripped of context." Carol said, "What context makes donor property ours to discuss as collateral? We were exploring bridge financing." Everyone on this board knew that. Carol's chair moved back an inch. "We authorized financing against museum assets." Martin's gaze snapped to her. "Assets, liquidity, donor commitments, you knew how thin the line was." "No," Carol said. "You made the line thin after we voted." Museum counsel touched Martin's sleeve. "Martin." He pulled his arm away. "We were weeks from missing payroll," Helen's attorney said. "So Winter Light was included in financing materials." Martin answered through a tight jaw. I included values for discussion. Nothing was pledged. Helen stood. You used my painting to make your museum look richer than it was. Martin's voice sharpened. I was trying to keep the museum open. The motive finally stood in the open. Not greed. The truth he had polished, until it stopped sounding like wrongdoing. He looked around the table. You think payroll waits for perfect ethics? We were weeks from cutting programs. People would have lost jobs. Tessa lowered her eyes. I understood why. That was the argument that had worked on her. Martin turned toward me. And you know what that means. You have spent your career protecting staff. I felt the hook in it. He was offering me my old identity back. If you destroy this institution to clear your name, he said, do not pretend nobody else pays for it. For a moment, I wanted to believe him. Not because he was right, because the old bargain was familiar. Take the wound. Keep the building standing. Rachel stayed silent beside me. So did Tessa. Nobody rescued me from the choice. I looked at Carol. If telling the truth about how this museum was financed destroys it, then I am not the person who built that weakness. Martin's jaw tightened. I will not carry a missing painting so the board can avoid looking at a bad decision. I will not carry Tessa's signature either. She signed a report she should not have signed. She has to answer for that. Tessa's face did not change. But her mistake does not make my custody form proof of theft. My old mistake does not make Sunday disappear. And your fear of layoffs did not make Helen's painting yours. Martin stared at me. You do not get to make me responsible for the cost of telling the truth. Nobody moved. Naomi closed the folder in front of her. The insurer will refer the unauthorized movement, the financing records, and the disappearance of Winter Light to outside counsel and law enforcement. Mr. Bennett is no longer the sole focus of our inquiry. Not cleared, not vindicated, not yet. But no longer the story Martin had prepared. Helen sat down again. Carol removed her museum pin and placed it beside her notebook. Martin looked around the table as if the room had betrayed him. It had not. The room had simply stopped agreeing to his version. Tessa met my eyes once. She did not smile. Neither did I. There was still a missing painting. There was still her false signature. There was still my old report. Truth had not made any of us clean. It had only made it harder for one person to decide what everyone else was allowed to see. 3 weeks after the board meeting, Winter Light came back to Ashford in a gray transit case that did not belong to the museum. Law enforcement had found it in a climate-controlled storage facility outside the city. The broker's company had leased the unit. The canvas had been removed from its frame, wrapped correctly, and stored without visible damage. That fact became its own kind of insult. Whoever moved it had known exactly how to protect it. By then, investigators had reconstructed the part I had never been able to see. Voss had opened the frame Sunday night, removed the canvas, returned the empty frame to its transit crate, and resealed the crate before Monday. Martin used Tessa's signed condition report to close the gap in the paperwork. Luis and I later signed the sealed crate into receiving without reopening it. My signature had never followed the painting. It had followed an empty crate. Helen Stratton did not celebrate. She transferred most of her collection out of Ashford before the month ended. Martin resigned before the board could vote on his removal. His attorney called it a decision made in the best interest of the institution. Nobody used the word confession. Tessa received a formal disciplinary finding for signing a condition report she had not verified. She kept her job. One of her technicians did not. The lab lost the position Martin had once promised to protect. When Tessa told me, she did not say the truth had been worth it. She said, her name was Claire. I understood what she meant. My suspension ended after the insurer concluded there was no evidence that I had participated in the Sunday transfer or the financing discussion. The museum offered me my old job back. Then it offered me Martin's title on an interim basis after I refused. I refused that too. Carol Ames finally asked what I would accept. 6 months, I said. Consulting only. Collection controls, access policy, outside loan procedure, no executive title. She looked disappointed. You could help rebuild this place. I am helping rebuild the part I understand. And after 6 months? I decide after 6 months. I had spent too many years making permanent promises because other people were uncomfortable with uncertainty. I was done doing that. The first morning I returned, Luis was in the loading corridor. He lifted one hand. I stopped. He looked older than he had a month earlier. I should have said more, he told me. Yes, he waited for me to make it easier. I did not. After a moment, he nodded. I'm sorry. Thank you. We left it there. We did not become closer because he apologized. We did not become enemies because I did not forgive him on schedule. We went back to work. Working beside him again was harder and more honest. Tessa and I avoided being alone together during the first week, not because anyone ordered us to, because the investigation had turned every ordinary gesture into something that could be interpreted, and both of us needed time to learn the difference between caution and fear. On Friday afternoon, Naomi Price returned the torn conservation tag to the museum's evidence file. The criminal investigation was still open. The financing records were still being reviewed. Martin had not been charged with anything. Truth, it turned out, did not arrive with a clean ending either. I found Tessa in conservation near closing. Winter light rested on an easel beneath neutral lamps. The canvas had been reunited with its frame but not rehung. A small archival sleeve lay beside the treatment notes. Inside it was the cream-colored tag, still torn, still carrying the false-looking initials and the mark where someone had lifted the adhesive. Tessa was writing at the work table. I stopped at the doorway. Am I interrupting? Yes. I waited. She glanced at me. You can still come in. I stepped inside. Our conversations had become more like that. No pretending that irritation meant rejection. No pretending kindness erased everything else. I nodded toward the sleeve. They gave it back. Evidence release for conservation documentation. Are you replacing it? No. She capped her pencil. We don't restore evidence. I looked at the tag. Months earlier, a piece of paper, smaller than my hand, had become the first thing in the museum that refused to support the story being told about me. Later, it had become proof that Tessa had hidden more than she admitted. Now it was neither rescue nor accusation. It was simply part of the record. Do you still hate it? She asked. Some days. Reasonable. She pulled the second chair away from the table with her foot. I did not sit immediately. Crowded rooms still bothered me more than they used to. When someone lowered their voice behind me in a hallway, part of me still wondered whether my name had entered the sentence. I still read emails twice before sending them. I still had moments when explaining too much felt safer than saying one clean thing and letting it stand. None of that disappeared because the painting came back. Tessa did not ask whether I was all right. She had stopped asking questions that required polite lies. Instead, she opened a paper bag. Turkey, no mustard. I stared at her. You remembered. You have ordered the same thing for years. That sounds less thoughtful when you say it like that. It is not meant to sound thoughtful. I laughed. A real one this time. Then I sat. We ate beside winter light without talking about the investigation. After a while, Tessa said, I meant what I said at your house. Which part? No gratitude. I remember. And you? No rescue. She nodded. Her hand rested on the table between us. Not reaching, not asking. I placed mine beside it, close enough that our fingers almost touched. Neither of us moved the last inch. Not yet. The torn tag remained under plastic beside us. Nothing about it had been repaired. That did not mean nothing had changed. Some people do not destroy you by shouting. They do it by writing a version of you that everyone else can believe. And sometimes the person who helps you survive is not the person who fixes your life. It is the person who finally refuses to repeat the lie. If this story stayed with you, tell me in the comments whether you have ever had to fight for the truth of your own life. And if you want more stories like this, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.